Hi, good afternoon. I'm Cliff. Welcome to Candid Conversations on the web at one Candid Conversations.blogspot.com, and of course here on YouTube on our channel. So as you can see here, I'm looking at Kijiji today, and I'm looking at some rents. Not planning on leaving where I'm not leaving right now, just so you know. I'm quite happy, but at one point, yes, I am going to have to consider doing that. It's something that I will have to do in the future. So at this point, I'm looking here and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, the rents are really quite crazy in Ontario, as they are right across North America. It is really becoming quite hard to get a place, whether it's a single bedroom apartment like the one I filtered through for here in an apartment building, or you want to get a house. So just for giggles, I went forward and put in the filter saying I want an apartment, non-furnished, no real preferences as far as utilities, but definitely, uh, you know, here's what I'm looking for. Came up with this selection of apartments. How about that? The people who are reading this will actually see free advertising. How about that for the renters or the landlords rather? But when you look at this, it's really quite interesting to see how expensive it's gotten. So to get a place like this, you're going to need looking at $1,502 for this one first apartment here. Here's the problem, or the real issue that comes into play. When you go forward and do this, you have to submit um, a request. So you might be asked for a deposit by a landlord. Sometimes they do that, and it is actually allowable in Ontario. And you might also, be told it's non-refundable. Hopefully you get it back, but it could be non-refundable. And then you put on a list. And the other thing too is that you get into a situation where landlords might ask for credit history and tenancy history. Where did you live before? What did you do? That's a thing. It is a thing. The other thing too that they're going to do in Ontario and the rest of Canada, they do this, is they ask for the first and the last month's rent. And in Alberta too, they ask actually for some extra money for damages and stuff like that. So Alberta is really very expensive to rent. But here in Ontario, they don't do that. Here they might do that, but here in Ontario, generally it's your first and your last month. So this place, if I wanted to rent it, would basically mean I'd have to save up $3,004. $3,004 just to rent that. If I get lucky, get get to jump in. There are some real challenges with this. I think that we need to really start looking at thinking, is this really a good system? We know that here in Ontario, there is a standard lease that you sign. It is a thing that's actually found on the LTV site. I'll show you that in a few moments. And also there are human rights here with regard to that. But what's really interesting is I've noticed how adversarial this has become. This is really becoming a pitched battle between people to get places. And also it is really getting to the point where it's the haves versus the have-nots. The people who can't afford a place like that. There's not a lot out there in the way of geared to income housing. It's pretty much market rent. And this is what the market is saying it can bear, $1,500. So if you got that kind of money floating around, good for you. I'm awesome. But most people don't. A lot of people are living right now, particularly with inflation, pay to pay. I'm now having to look at doing things like rooming with friends or family, and even with strangers. It's becoming a fashionable thing to do that now. And it's not illegal, by the way, to be a roommate. It's not against the rules of an apartment building to do it, except if you're a troublemaker. If you cause problems, you can get yourself and, of course, the person that you're rooming with thrown out of the building. So be nice. Basically, that's my takeaway on that. I'm a roommate of somebody, and we have done really well where we are. Been here 3 years. It's great. Won't say where I am, but I will say that where I live, the conditions are really, really quite good. So having said that, but your responsibility is to, if you're going to be a roommate or you're going to be renting, to make sure that you do your part. keep your end of the bargain, particularly if you're going to be doing the actual renting. You make sure you pay on time. Make sure you're not a jerk to the landlord. Make sure that you respect that he has to pay a mortgage. It's important. The other thing too, if you're the landlord, respect the tenant. Remember that these people need a home. They need to live somewhere. Hamilton has a real problem with homelessness in the city, and there's a real issue with very aggressive problems to have to deal with, and aggressive homeless people. Um, it's not good here in Hamilton. The homeless are very aggressive. They can be very nasty people. Unfortunately, it's not as to. I actually spoke with a guy the other day who's been in some major cities around the world. He says Hamilton is one of the worst with regards to its homeless population. They're very, very good. I've seen it myself. I've actually experienced it myself with very aggressive panhandling, very aggressive and somewhat almost violent activity towards people who don't help them. So they've become very feral, if I can put it that way. So we do need to work on this. And part of it is dealing with this first and last month's thing. Should it go away? Yeah, I think it should. I think the idea of the first and last month has had its day. I think it's important now to basically say, can you pay? Can you regularly pay? The idea of putting a first and a last month's rent doesn't make sense anymore. The only province that doesn't do this is Quebec. Quebec does not require a last month's rent. You pay month to month, and you get a year lease. It's always a year. There's no month to month. There's no 6 month. There's no bi-weekly. There's nothing like this. It's a year. That's it. 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. You go each year. There's none of these little crazy things that a lot of people do. Like some people will actually have a bi-weekly lease. Some people will have a 6 month lease. Some people will have a yearly lease, and some people will have what's known as just simply a month to month lease. Now, I don't like you or you don't like me, we're not. But that's really not solid anymore either. It needs to be a contract. And I think that's the reason why we have this first and last month thing, because of these kinds of leases. Those things need to go away. They don't make sense to have bi-weekly, monthly leases. It's just silly, 6 month leases. There should be caveats within leases to allow exit, obviously, and that's for the lawyers to talk about. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a call center guy. I'm a YouTuber. I'm a blogger. Okay, so I don't know this stuff. But the bottom line is that can be worked into any kind of agreement. But the idea here is that this is nonsense. To have to pay this upfront anyway, and then to have to double up on it, then possibly, do a credit check and wait, maybe pay a deposit that's not refundable. Doug, Mr. Ford, whichever you prefer to be called, you need to fix this, because the bottom line is this doesn't make sense anymore. It's no longer common sense to allow such a silly thing to continue. It worked back in the day. It's not working anymore because it's pricing people out. We need affordable housing and we need it today. So changing the rules a little bit, and partly by doing this away, would help. Now, it's important for people to understand the rules with regard to this. And I'm actually flipping over here to the landlord tenant board. Renting in Ontario, all you have to do is just look that up, and you'll see a really great site here that tells you what the act is about, your responsibilities, whose responsibilities are what, with regard to the landlord, and you, what to do with regard to facing a tribunal. I've done it, actually. I've been in front of the tribunal. It's not scary, but it is a process, and you have to be honest, and you have to try and, work within that system. But it is a process, and you have to be fair, and so does the landlord. And it's actually, a lot of people think, oh, it's a tribunal, but actually, in a way, it's actually a court. So the person who is called a member basically presides over what's going on in that particular thing. But it's part of Tribunals Ontario, as you can see. And Tribunals Ontario falls under the auspices of the Ministry of the Attorney General. So it does actually fall within the scope of the the legal frameworks of Ontario. So it's a legal body. Okay, so it's just a different form of adjudication and doing things with regard to this. So recommend that you go through this site and take a look at it. I'm not going to go through the finer points of it simply because it's just going to be too daunting. But this is the Residential Act, as you can see a little bit up here, okay, and so on and so forth. So the actual website right up here, tribunals.on.ca, and then you'll see renting in Ontario, or just search for it in Google, you'll find it. The other thing too is knowing what your rights are with respect to human rights, and you do have those. So there are things that you should know. This is the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and they've got a pamphlet out. You can find this at onrc.ca or on ohrc.on.ca. Sorry. Yeah, I'm officially impaired. What are you going to say? Or what are you going to do? So basically, human rights with regards to tenant, this is the brochure. It talks about what you cannot be discriminated against for with regard to renting. Things like your race, your ancestry, family status, marital status, disability. I'm visually impaired, so they can't say, "Oh, you're blind, you can't rent here." Financial, that's another thing. Receipt of public assistance. So if you're on the Ontario Works, they can't say no. They can't. They're not allowed to do so. Let's see what else here. Now they may ask. They may ask for things like the landlord's going to choose how they do things. They can do credit reference. So you can see here, rental history, credit references, and/or credit checks may be done, and they do it. Now I've heard the banks frown on this; they really don't like that, and there's a good reason why. When you start doing credit checks and you start going into Equifax and TransUnion, and I forget the third one, you start basically pinging the cards of a person when it's a credit card, but when it's just regular credit stuff, you're pinging their credit. And what happens is it drives the number down. And in Canada, we use the number system, and 500 is not great. 600 is pretty good. 700 is exactly where you want to be. 700, you don't want to be any higher than that. 750 max. But when you start getting into 500 and 400, you're not going to be really looked at. Technically speaking, landlords, even if you have poor credit at 4 or 5, should not, I repeat, should not discriminate against you and say, "Oh, your credit is poor, I'm not going to rent to you." That, technically speaking, ladies and gents, is illegal in Ontario. It's against the Human Rights Code to do that. You cannot say no based on a person's ability to have good credit. People don't, for the most part. I can tell you, I've worked as a credit analyst, and believe me, I've seen bad credit, and there's lots of it out there. Not everybody today has excellent credit. It's a very small part of the society in which we live that have good credit. So what am I getting to here? I think what I'm saying in this commentary with regard to renting in Ontario is we need a rethink from the government of Ontario. We need smart people getting together with our Premier, Mr. Ford, and saying to him, we need to rethink this. We need to get rid of the system that we currently have and enhance it with a better one that has a yearly lease with an option to exit in it, and a better tribunal system that is not so adversary, but rather collaborative. And the other thing too is we need to have landlords and tenants not become so adversarial. And that's what happens. That's where we get into the LTV and where things really get riled up and wrangly, and mudslinging happens, and then you get all kinds of bad things. I mean, I've even unfortunately had people say nasty things about me as when I was renting. There was a landlord that I was dealing with whose staff member was saying, "Oh, this and that, they're doing this and that, they have this and that in their house," and you're not allowed to do that. Again, a landlord isn't allowed to speak with respect to anything about you to other tenants. So that's another thing too. So just as we have uh, to be honest and respectful with each other, we also have to expect that the landlord on the other side is going to do the same thing. Am I saying that all tenants are angels? No, 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 no. Not all tenants are angels. Um, we've all done things, even as tenants, that we really shouldn't be doing. Sometimes we do miss a rent, something happens, part of life. It's important to work together. That's another thing too. We need to build a more collaborative structure between landlords and tenants where it's not adversarial. But the key thing, even before we get into renting, before we start doing things, particularly with respect to, talking about paying this kind of money, if I'm going to pay this kind of money, I need to make sure that one, I'm going to, find a house. I'm not expecting to find a house or an apartment on the first shot. Okay, 2 or 3 down, that's fine. But I shouldn't be losing my credit, and I shouldn't be, losing money to get a house. And it shouldn't be a me versus somebody who has more money than me to get that. Housing and being able to be housed is actually, in my opinion, a human right. And you should be able to be housed. So, and that's where a more affordable housing needs to come in. And even buildings that currently exist, that's something that the Ministry of Housing should look at and say, you know what? A third of your apartments, all of them, whether they've been built in the 50s or just yesterday, all of them now have to have a third of the apartments as gear townhome. That's it. None of this nonsense of all market rent, because there's a lot of apartments out here. And particularly, I could take my camera out and show you where there's 3 or 4 or 5, 6 apartments around here. Most of them are all market rents, no gear, none, zero. This is a sign that we're in trouble. When we see this kind of amount of money that we're going to have to shell out a month, and what's even worse, if we want to even get the place, $3,004. Let me put it to you this way: that's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Why would anybody in their right mind have to put that kind of money out to get an apartment in this day and age, in this economy? Should we allow that to continue? Why are we allowing this nonsense to continue? Well, we know that, particularly when we look at the human rights side of this, everybody is technically what the Human Rights Tribunal is saying is that everybody's a right to a home. They're not directly saying it, but essentially, yeah, you have a right to live somewhere. And what we're doing here is what we've done is we've made housing adversarial. We've made it a business, which is really not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a social thing. Yes, I understand mortgages. I get that. But at the end of the day, it's important to be mindful that there's more to it than just making a monetary incrementation of your self-worth. Well, I guess I'm wording it wrong. There's more to it than just making money off of people to live in your space. You should be, if you're going to be a landlord, you should be a person who is, yes, interested in helping people have a nice, safe home, and you should be respectful of them and their wallet, and you should also, make sure that they're going to be respectful of your wallet, because you do have that mortgage to pay. And it's by collaborating, not by saying, which one of you is better than the other. That's not the way this is supposed to go on and it's supposed to run. But that's what we've actually set up. And that's why people who are actually probably going to be better tenants than what you've already rented to. And I'm sure a lot of landlords out there might see this and go, oh my God, I had Jack and Jill in the other day. They seemed like such a lovely couple, but their credit was 550. I can't rent to that. But Johnny and his bro Gene here want to come in. They have a 700 score. Cool, I'm going to rent to them. And I did, and it's like 3 months now that I've had them here in my place. And look what they've done to it. Oh my God, the walls are painted black. They got a disco ball going on here. and yet Jack and Jill would have made that place their home, and little children maybe, who knows? But because they had a bad scratch, oh no, I can't touch that. Common sense seems to have really gone the way of the dodo all of a sudden lately in our society, particularly with this kind of thing. And I think we need to bring it back. Let's get rid of the 2-month thing. Let's get rid of the idea of a 6-month or a bi-weekly or even a weekly lease for a home. And let's make it a lease that is a year with an option to opt out if needed. And let's make it less adversarial and more collaborative, where we have people, and even in the LTB, a lot of tenant, landlord tenant board that are just going to say, no, we're not going to adjudicate just yet. We're going to collaborate. We're going to see where we can find the middle ground. Then if they can't, or if you can't get there, that's when we go to the adjudication phase and say, it's been a slice, hasta la vista, you're done. Those are my thoughts on this. I think it's warranting of some real thought, real important issue here that we need to start thinking about. I hope that you've enjoyed this little segment. Tell me what you think. You can email me at candidconversations@hotmail.com. Also, a note for everybody looking in on this. Do you want to take a look on Monday, or not Monday, but Tuesday or Wednesday? More than likely Wednesday, I will have DC Glenn on the web chatting with me for a little bit in Zoom, and then basically we're going to upload it to the site and talk about Whoop, There It Is. Great song from the 90s and what he's been up to. That's coming up next week. Thank you very much for stopping in. If you like what you're seeing, please don't hesitate. Come on in and be a member of our little group here on YouTube by subscribing, like, and share the videos, and also here on Candid Conversations at one-on-one, candidconversations.blogspot.com. Feel free to share the site, tell people what we're about, and comment and like. We'd love to hear from you. I appreciate your time today, and thank you again very much for stopping in. My name is Cliff, and I'm out of here.